Hey guys, it's Autumn here, and welcome back to week 4 of Inktober. And today we are doing another piece, so let's just jump right into our story. Simon was not enjoying himself, as any person who had been kidnapped 2 days in a row most likely would not. He was proud of himself that he'd managed to draw blood from the same man that had punched him yesterday, though. He'd bitten the man when he'd grabbed Simon in the library, hoping that Jack could use the blood to track them down somehow. His temple was throbbing from where he had been hit and subsequently crumpled to the floor like a sack of potatoes. He'd managed to keep his glasses this time, which was extremely helpful, and he was taking note of the facial features and hair this time. The man sitting in front of him, his interrogator, had piggish features, a large round nose, thick lips with protruding large front teeth, and was overall round and gross. His hair was receding, leaving him with an uncomfortably large and shiny forehead. His clothes were dirty and torn, and he looked like he hadn't seen a shower in a long time. The man behind him, who had been ensuring that his interrogator didn't kill him, was far cleaner looking. He had shaven recently, was younger looking in general, and wore a clean-pressed suit that looked custom-tailored. He spoke in low tones with a slight accent to his voice. His hair was black and slicked with more than enough hair gel, and it gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. "So, you gonna tell us what you know, or what?" the pig inquired, spitting as he spoke, causing Simon to recoil from his disgusting breath. He stared back through his round-rimmed glasses, intense and sure. "I don't know anything about Dark Angel. I told you this before. Not that you or your boss," Simon spoke, shifting his glance to the man in the suit, "want to listen to anything I have to say." "He's not my boss," the pig laughed. "You haven't met him yet, and trust me, you don't want to meet him." Simon cowered a bit in his chair as the pig leaned in closer, his gross teeth and breath far too close for comfort. "Our boss, Misfit, will be here shortly to deal with you." The man in the suit smiled evilly, revealing perfect white teeth. "Now come, my ill-mannered friend, let's make sure there's still something left for our dear boss." The two men exited now, talking low and with their hands, as Simon using this to assume that their accents must be Italian. They walked out of view, leaving Simon alone for the first time since they'd taken him hostage. He glanced around his surroundings, trying to figure out where he was exactly. He'd only been in the van they'd shoved him into for a few minutes before being dragged out, with a blindfold on, and sat down in a chair he was now tied to. The interior of the room was small. It was nowhere near as large and spacious as the paper mill the night before. It smelled of wood chips and slightly of rot, so maybe an old mill, though Simon was not aware of any abandoned mills in Boston. Jack might be, though. Simon clasped his hands together loosely. These idiots had made the mistake of not tying his arms behind him and leaving them just tied against his body. He tapped his watch, a present from Jack last Christmas, and tapped in SOS, which activated his watch to call Jack. It silently vibrated against his wrist as he waited for Jack to pick up. It felt like ages until it stopped buzzing, leaving him with a dimly lit screen showing Jack's smiling face looking up at him. He had answered and was probably waiting for Simon to say anything. He took a shaky breath in and prepared to pass the information. "Jack, I'm in a mill, don't know where. Same two guys grabbed me, one in a suit, one in gross clothes, both Italian. Track my watch if you can, please," Simon pleaded quietly, tears beginning to stream down his face as the men came back into the room. He slid the watch around to be facing down and pushed it against his leg. "Hey, who are you talking to?" the pig demanded, storming into the room and into his face. He steeled his expression, trying to stop the torrent of tears. No one, just myself. I hate being tied to a chair in some old building," Simon retorted, sniffling a bit. The pig eyed him carefully, watching for anything to give him away. But nothing did, as Simon had been taught by Jack how to stay calm under distress. "All right, fine. Boss is here. Wants to talk to you, shrimp," he snorted, turning his back to him and walking to the door. "He's ready, boss." In walked what would be a rather imposing figure if Simon hadn't been married to Jack. Short but wide man of muscular build, wearing a tight-fitting suit of black with a gray undershirt that was unbuttoned at the top. He wore a mask. It looked ancient to Simon, but it had new elements imbued into its design. It was black and white, similar to yin and yang, swirling around each feature, making it hard to find a face. It was a dizzying effect for sure, especially with the possible concussion that Simon had. Simon focused, looking at the silhouette of the man as opposed to the mask. He seemed familiar, strangely so. It was almost as if he'd seen this misfit once before, but he couldn't place it. "So, Simon Allen McBrien," the misfit spoke, nearly spitting poison as he said McBrien. "I hear you haven't been very cooperative with my associates. We can't have that now, can we?" The lilt to his voice was strange, almost as if he were telling a story to a child. Simon was startled by the tone, the cadence, everything about this man was strange and disorienting, and he had no idea where he'd learned Simon's middle name. He was still silent and growing pale, still trying to identify this person behind the mask. "Well, I should let you know. I have my ways of getting the information I want, Simon. Don't think I won't go after Jack to get the information I want," he teased, suddenly brandishing a short knife with a curled tip. It reflected a sickening green in the low light. He moved quicker than Simon thought possible, and suddenly there was a warm spot growing underneath his chin. The knife had barely cut him right above the Adam's apple, and Simon held his breath, trembling. "I do hope I have your attention now. Now answer me, I will go after Jack, your sweet little husband." "Who is Dark Angel?" he bellowed, dropping the mocking, playful attitude for a moment of pure fury. Simon trembled, a tear escaping down his cheek against his will. He shakily released a breath. "I have no idea who he is," Simon choked out. Holding back the tears he could feel just barely contained. He could feel the seething hatred that was barely contained below this man's mask, and Simon was more terrified than he had ever been before. He was silently hoping and calling for Jack, wishing and begging for him to come save him from this nightmare he'd been dragged into. "Wrong answer! I hope Jack is expecting visitors!" Misfit yelled, reassuming the fake, playful tone, and pulling the knife away from Simon's throat. He heaved a deep breath in, coughing as the air filled his lungs. Misfit spun on his heels and back into Simon's face, causing him to recoil into the back of the chair again. He smiled a crooked grin in his face as he pulled the knife slowly across Simon's cheek, causing him to shriek with pain. The warm blood dripped down his face, a nauseating sensation, as Simon grimaced and glared back at the hollow eyes of the mask. "Let's hope he gets here soon or you're a goner. Poor Simon couldn't handle my poison. Oh, how sad," he mocked, pulling away and sauntering off towards the door. "Make sure he doesn't bleed out on us now, my friends." He exited the room, laughing maniacally as he went. Jack had been on his way back to the station from Krusty's, where he'd had a rather tasty lunch, when Simon called him. He had been walking up the front steps to meet Brewer, had been waiting outside for him for a few minutes, when his phone rang in his pocket. He rushed to pick it up, hoping that it meant Sam had gotten information they could act on. He pressed the phone to his ear hurriedly as he rushed up the steps and into the station with Brewer. "McBrien," Jack answered hopefully. He listened intently, but only heard the shuffling of fabric against the microphone. He heard a deep breath, then, quietly, pleading softly, Simon's voice. It was distant, not close to the microphone, but loud enough to be heard. Jack stopped in his tracks as Simon said his name, standing perfectly still in the hall as people passed around him. He cupped his hand over his mouth as tears started to pour down his cheeks and onto his hand. Brewer turned and ran to him, placing a hand on his shoulder, then glancing around quickly before pulling Jack into an empty conference room. Jack was taking note of everything Simon was saying as he turned on speakerphone and placed it on the table. When he mentioned his watch, Jack looked at Brewer, who immediately exited and ran down the hallway. He heard a new voice talking, a rough voice, demanding, sounding though now muffled and unclear, indicating that Simon had probably shifted his watch. It seemed tense, though not physical in any way, and eventually the rough voice receded and a new one entered. It was strange to hear this voice, a rougher masculine voice, though used to speak as a child. The voice held vague familiarity, but nothing that he could pinpoint. He talked to Simon, continuing this tone until he shifted the watch to have clearer sound. That's when he heard the man, assumed Misfit at this point by Jack, bellow at Simon to tell him who Dark Angel was. Simon denied any knowledge of his identity, sticking to his word. He heard Simon cough, then the Misfit speak again. It was a quick exchange, the most blood-curdling sound he never wanted to hear, Simon screaming in pure, untethered pain. Tears poured down Jack's cheek again, and he was in pain himself hearing Simon scream like that. He needed to know where he was, now. As he stood to leave, he heard Simon's voice again. "Please, Jack, please save me. I don't want to die. Please," he sobbed, the audio beginning to crackle on Jack's end. The audio stopped playing through the speaker, though the call was still active, and Jack sat there in silence crying for a moment before steeling himself and pocketing his phone. He marched out of the room, eyes red, and after Brewer. Hope you guys enjoyed this part of the story. Can't wait to finish it off next week with you guys. Bye, everyone.
Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to check out another one over there, and if you want to see the full playlist for this series, check out over here. Thank you for watching, and subscribe if you like, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye everyone!